So, Nitish, tell us something about yourself, but very short.
Yes, sir. So, my name is Nitish Rajora and I'm born and brought up in Delhi. I did my graduation from Shriram College of Commerce in BCom Honors, and post that I have recently finished my Masters. And my hobbies include reading books on Indian mythology. Apart from that, I also play cricket, and I have interest in reading contemporary books on international relations. So
right.
these are my hobbies.
Nitish, I observed that you have done something on women empowerment.
Yes, sir.
You presented a case study on women empowerment.
Yes, sir.
Tell us the journey of women empowerment in this country after independence.
So India as a democracy keeps focus on its women, and if we talk about the journey from 1947 till 2021, then firstly in the area of health, the participation of women in activities like the maternal care that have increased significantly. Also, so the economic participation of women, which was far lesser in the times of independence, has increased, but there is further scope of improvement because the current labor force participation of women is around 20%. And apart from that, sir, the participation of women in sports is a very key factor. We have seen that more number of women athletes are participating in Olympics and other games also. So overall, if we look at
if I ask you, where does this empowerment flow from?
So
the primary sources of empowerment of women come from where?
Yes.
What are the primary sources?
So one of the primary sources, the first source that I think of is the family of the women, and if the family is supportive and they have.
I'm looking for a different answer. The empowerment of women flows primarily from the constitution.
Yes, sir.
Equal rights, equal opportunities, and that kind of thing.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Second is representation of women in legislature, in panchayat, and elsewhere. Yes. And third is education.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Okay. I find that you have a very impressive educational background. You got 10 out of 10 in class 10, then 94% in class 12, then you went to SRCC. Why do you want to join civil services?
So after class 12, I decided to pursue civil services, and from that period onwards, I was continuously involved in the preparation. And also, sir, I think that my abilities and my skills would be better utilized when if I become a civil servant.
And your first choice is IAS?
Yes, sir.
Why do you want to get into IAS? What is the difference between IAS and other services?
So all the services are good, but we were asked to give a preference. So in that order, I decided IAS, and I kept it over IFS because I wanted to work.
What is the difference between Indian administrative services and other services? What makes it little distinct? Why everybody gives IAS as the first choice?
So the diversities and the opportunities that are given to an IAS officer are fairly wide in their working. And also, sir, the various departments that an IAS officer manages, it gives them a wider horizon. So that is why IAS is generally the first preference.
A better sentence would be an IAS officer is basically a catalyst of change. On the other hand, an IPS officer or the foreign service officer or even the police officer may not be a catalyst of change to that extent.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Because they are in a position to influence the decision of the government.
Yes.
So that's why, that's the difference.
Thank you, sir.
Last question. What is ailing IAS? I'm not talking about civil service, I'm asking IAS. What is ailing IAS?
So one of the factors that...
Even the Prime Minister said that they can't be asked to do everything. They can't be asked to run a chemical factory or a petroleum factory or to fly the aircraft. Why this negativity which is going around IAS as a service?
So as the Honorable Prime Minister have said that IAS should not run every department of the government. So we are seeing that IAS is there in almost every field. For example, the Reserve Bank of India governor is also an IAS officer. The CAG is also an IAS officer. So I think one factor that could be done is that specialization within a generalist approach.
What is ailing?
Yes, sir.
क्या कौन नुकसान पहुंचा रहा है IAS को? What is ailing? What is wrong with IAS? What needs to be done?
So that the reason that I could think of is, firstly, there should be certain aspect of specialization also within the services of IAS, and second is the elite perspective that the common people have towards the IAS. It is also one negative factor, and these are some factors that could be improved.
I agree with you on the second point that people think that it's an elite kind of a service and they are not bothered about the disadvantaged section of the society. But as for the first kind of the expertise, it is not meant for being an expertise. It is basically a generalized kind of a service for navigation. And what is to be navigated? Decision making process.
Yes, sir.
That's the idea.
Thank you.
Otherwise, suppose there is an expert of atomic energy, there is an expert of space, there is a doctor. Naturally, I can't replace a doctor.
Yes, sir.
But if the doctor is proposing something and that looks all right, then it is my job to take it to fruition.
Yes.
लेकिन क्या होगा कि गवर्नमेंट के जो रूल्स रेगुलेशन इतने डिफिकल्ट एंड कॉम्प्लेक्स हैं दैट इट विल गेट लॉस्ट समवेयर एंड दैट इज माय जॉब एज ऑल राइट थैंक यू वेरी मच
Yeah. So, Nitish, I would like you to share with the panel key features of Indian banking sector.
So the first key feature is the presence of the public sector banks, the private sector banks, and the foreign banks. Second is the dual regulation of the public sector banks. The first is through the Reserve Bank of India, and second through the Government of India. And third is that the horizon of the reach of the Indian banking system is gradually increasing, and especially after the Jan Dhan scheme, it has increased substantially. And fourth is that the key schemes of the government are also implemented through the banks. For example, the NABARD and the regional rural banks, they are also key facilitator in giving the government services, giving the government subsidies, and making them available at the most grassroots level. So these are some of the key features.
Right. Okay. Now, there have been, naturally, we all witnessed tremendous sweeping changes in the way the banking operations are conducted in terms of applying new age ICT tools and technologies, right? ATMs have come about from those times. So we traveled some distance, but where do you see the applications of new emerging technologies such as AI, machine learning, and VR and so on and so forth in banking? And how do you think it will make, more beneficial for people at large?
Yes. So if we talk about the Internet of Things and the artificial intelligence, then they can be involved in various aspects of banking. For example, if a customer wants to open an account with a bank, then that process could be fastened with the use of technology. Second, sir, there's an emerging technology called the blockchain technology, which can be used in the banking sector to regulate the multiple banks. And to, for example, if a person defaults in one particular bank, then that information could be quickly dispensed to other banks also, which is currently lacking. And the government is also moving in that direction with the plan of formulating a public credit registry, which could be further enhanced with a blockchain technology. So these are certain new emerging technologies.
All right. Governor Rajan suggested that the balance sheets of banks need to be cleaned up,
Yes.
right?
Yes, sir.
Before he faded away. And I think 2016 there were certain regulations which are put in place in addressing this problem of NPA. So can you trace this problem A, B, and what is the status now? Have there been any improvements in terms of handling this issue?
Yes. So if we trace the root of this problem, then that could be traced after the post-2008 financial crisis, because after that crisis, the Reserve Bank of India, as well as the government, followed an expansionary policy, both the expansionary fiscal policy and the expansionary monetary policy. So in that period, huge loans were given, and it was called the easy money policy. So post that, when Dr. Raghuram Rajan was the Reserve Bank of India governor, he ordered an asset quality review of the banks and to check whether the NPA position of the bank is true, what they are projecting, or the number is somewhat higher. So after that AQR was done, it was found that the number of the NPAs was far higher than the banks were actually projecting. And coming to your second point, sir, the current position of the NPA is that the majority of the NPA loans are categorized in the public sector banks, and the private sector banks are relatively well off if we compare in the position of the NPA. And the current NPAs of the banking system in India is around 8 and 9%. And there was a recent RBI study also after the Corona period that in future there's a possibility of the NPAs going up to 13%. So if the banking sector does not tighten the fiscal monetary policy, then there's a possibility of such a kind of situation.
Right. Now, what is your take on this move on the part of the government to consolidate and merge few banks with the better performing banks? Is that the right step?
So many committees have been formed for recommendation on the banking sector, and they have recommended that Indian banking system should be such that there should be few large banks, and below them there should be middle level banks and more grassroots level banks. So I believe the policy of the government in merging of banks is in the right direction, because we are seeing that many public sector banks were loss making and they had huge NPAs. And coming to the second point of mixing a weak bank and a strong bank, then I believe that the alternate of this policy could be merging two weak banks. That would not have been a prudent approach, because if we merge two weak banks, then the new entity would be more fragile. But if we talk about merging a strong bank and a weak bank, then the strong bank has the possibility of taking over the NPAs and taking over the losses of that weak bank. And ultimately, in few years, the position of the new entity could be resolved, and it could have a strong position.
In fact, the very use of these words, mergers, in the context of banking, the way it is being used, and you have also used it, puts me into a little kind of disequilibrium in understanding this particular word, merger. So, what is merger and acquisition, for that matter, right? So, can you explain these two terms in the right context, or the right in the way so that these can be comprehended correctly? So, what are M&As?
So merger is when a larger entity, when a smaller entity is merged with a larger entity. For example, the various banks small banks were merged with Bank of Baroda to make it a larger entity. And acquisition is generally done in the private sector, in which a particular firm buys off the other firm. So this is the difference.
So merger is in the context of two equal entities, technically.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so of course we are using this. That's why it puts me into some kind of discomfort. But acquisition is amongst two unequal entities. In fact, and mostly these are not friendly in nature, right? There is a tendency to gobble up the smaller player, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nitish,
Yes, sir.
Nitish, you have PSIR as your optional. Okay. Explain me the concept of political economy.
So political economy is the interaction between the economic situation and the political situation. For example, the political economy after 1991 in India was shifted from a socialist economy to a more liberalized economy. So this is one example of a mixture of politics and economy.
Okay. Do you think the current farm protests are also an example of it?
Yes, sir. The current farm protests are also example, because agriculture is a very important part of the Indian economy, and the policies, the legislation that the Indian Parliament has passed, it involves the aspect of politics. So it could be said as a merger of political economy.
Okay. There are some aspersions on the protest because probably quite well-off farmers are also a part of the protest. And it doesn't make sense, since if the per capita income of those farmers is quite high, and there is no reason for them to be a part of it. So what's your take on that?
Sorry, sir, I have a different opinion about that.
Okay.
I believe that in India, the Constitution of India gives every citizen of India right to protest peacefully. And if even the rich farmers feel that their interests are hurt, then they also have equal right to protest as the small farmers have. And even if we talk about the recent farm protest also, then in India, almost 86% of farmers are marginal and small. So even if large farmers are protesting, then we have to protect the interest of the large farmers also. And the government is also moving in that direction. We are seeing that the government has had 10 levels of talks with the farmers.
Should rich farmers be taxed?
Sir, I believe that the agriculture income should be taxed, and the income tax policy of the government of India has various slabs. So, naturally, if a farmer is a large farmer, if he's earning income over 5 lakh, he can be taxed.
Okay, okay. And who has the authority to tax agricultural income?
Sir, currently agriculture income is not taxed, but if we bring it under the IT Act, then it could be taxed under that legislation.
Okay, okay. You are following international relations as well. Currently, it is being said that the Taliban has controlled almost 85% of the territory of Afghanistan. So, do you think it is going to be the next regional challenge for all the countries in the region?
Sir, I believe that Taliban coming to power in Afghanistan with the use of violence is a possibility of, it's a possible concern for India and also the regional actors in the region. I think that all the regional actors, important actors like India, China, Iran, must come forward and make possible a scenario in which Taliban comes to power with negotiation with the government. So India has always moved forward in the direction of Afghanistan, Afghan control and Afghan-led peace process. And also, sir, India has also promoted the intra-Afghan talks. So that would be the right direction moving forward and not the violent takeover by Taliban.
Okay. You have mentioned one of your hobbies as reading books and listening to lectures on Indian mythology. So, what books have you read?
Sir, I have read books by Amish Tripathi, Dr. Vivek Devroy, and they are books ranging from Ramayana, Mahabharata, and also, sir, I have read books on Islamic history also.
Okay. So, what's the last book of Amish Tripathi that you have read?
Sir, I read Sita by Amish Tripathi.
Sita by Amish Tripathi. Okay. Do you think when we talk about Indian epics, we have a tendency to use the word mythology? Is it mythology or history?
Sir, if we look at the word in Sanskrit for these texts, then that word is itihas, which means these things happened in the past, but they have been explained to the people through some symbols, through some stories. And so so that is why there is a tendency that could also be called as a colonial mindset, that we always portray these epics as fiction. But the correct word for these epics is mythology, because mythology comes from a Greek word mythos, which means my story. And it is the experience of a particular person who has written these stories. For example, Ramayana was written by Valmiki ji, and Valmiki ji was a part of Ramayana. Vedvyas wrote the Mahabharata, and he was part of the Mahabharata. So this is why we call them as subjective truth. They are not objective truth. They have certain extrapolation, they have certain symbols, certain stories, but these things has happened in the past.
Okay. One last question, Nitish. I also share the same alma mater. So there is always a debate that colleges in DU have very high cutoffs, particularly in North Campus, and this goes on. The cutoffs keep going on every year, 98%, 99%. So do you think it is sustainable in the long run? I mean, there's a limit to which we can increase the cutoff. We have to find some alternative. So what is your opinion on it?
So, considering the diversity of the education system in India, we have some schools affiliated with CBSE, other with regional boards. So there is a sense of differentiation between them. For example, the marks allocated in the CBSE schools is comparatively higher than allocated in regional boards. That I have also seen in my college, where the students from considering northeastern states or West Bengal are very less. And most of the students are from CBSE schools. So that angle has to be considered, and the marking system all over the country must be in some sort of equality, and there has to be some sort of similar criteria for marking the students. And also these very high cutoffs like 98%, 99% are not sustainable, because a student who has got 90% is equally capable of getting into that college and studying after that. So, but because of these very high cutoffs, he is not given an opportunity to study in those colleges. So I believe there has to be certain mechanism in the future where we could have objective criteria over all over the country, and we could have some similarity of marks, so that it creates a level playing field for all the students.
Okay. Thank you, Nitish.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you, Nitish. You just step out, and we'll call you after a minute.
Thank you, sir.
So, Nitish, we found you outstanding. एक दिन जब जाए तो सवाल थोड़े से अगर छोटे और हो सकते हैं तो दैट वुड बी स्किल. You got a very pleasing personality. Your knowledge base is very good. Your way of presentation is very good. So I got nothing to add. Keep going, keep reading, keep assimilating whatever you are read, and you do very well. So all the very well. And take care. And regarding your women empowerment, I ask you, where does it flow from? You should be very clear. Have basic understanding of Indian Constitution, that is a must. Because all our actions have to be in conformity with the provision and spirit of the Constitution. Okay? Take care. All the way.
I think you should do well, Nitish, certainly. And your background is immaculate. And why shouldn't it be so? Madam Smith is the principal at the helm of affairs there. Yourself is doing very well for the college. But that's beside the point. Your answers were right on top. I focused on banking, but the questions can come in the larger canvas of commerce, business and commerce. So I'm sure you would have prepared well on that. So keep the good work going. And there's no reason. Only thing, when is the interview?
18th August.
18th August, which is about a month from now. I would urge you to remain, to keep the same balance, right? And don't get, I'm tempted to use a little not so good word, don't get carried away, right? So keep your moorings and peak on 18th August. That's the
Otherwise,
wonderful.
you should see your name in the
List.
in the final list.
Yes, sir. Nitish, I think you are quite good. Just one thing, that since you have PSIR as your optional, so keep a tab on international relations and also issues like farm purpose, and these things are continuing. Daily government is coming up with something for farmers. Just keep following. You will have something either on IR or on political science. You will have something. Okay? All the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update from Civilsdaily.